The morning sun rose over Colony 7 like it had done for the past 15 years. Mina watched from her kitchen window as her two children played in the yard. Their laughter filled the air. Life was peaceful here on the edge of human space. The colony had grown from a small outpost to a thriving community of 15,000 people. Farmers grew crops in the rich soil. Engineers built new homes and factories. Teachers educated the children. Everyone believed they were building something that would last forever. Admiral Minho Park sat in his office on Earth reviewing patrol reports. Nothing unusual. The border regions were quiet. Human ships moved freely through their territory. Trade with alien species was good. Peace had lasted for almost 20 years. Minho had spent his entire career preparing for wars that never came. Sometimes he wondered if all the weapons and training were necessary. Maybe the galaxy had finally learned to live together without violence. The communication from Colony 7 should have arrived at midnight. When it didn't, the watch officer assumed it was a technical problem. Communication sometimes failed in deep space. But when the backup systems also remained silent, concern grew. By morning, Minho received the alert. Colony 7 had gone completely dark. No messages, no distress calls, nothing. Just silence. Captain Hana Choi commanded the stealth frigate Shadow of Earth. When the orders came to investigate Colony 7, she felt a cold weight in her stomach. Hana had been a soldier for 12 years. She had seen combat during the border skirmishes. She knew what silence usually meant. Her ship jumped into hyperspace, racing toward the colony at maximum speed. The journey would take 6 hours. 6 hours to hope that everything was fine, that this was just a massive system failure. The Shadow of Earth dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Colony 7 system. Hana's sensors immediately showed the truth. Debris fields orbited the planet. The defense satellites were destroyed. The orbital station was a burning wreck. Her tactical officer spoke in a quiet voice. Multiple impact craters on the surface. Cities burning. No response to hails. Hana ordered her ship forward, activating stealth systems. Whoever did this might still be here. They found the colony's main city first, or what was left of it. Kinetic weapons had struck from orbit, turning buildings into rubble. Ground forces had moved through afterward, killing anyone who survived the bombardment. Bodies lay in the streets. The attack had been methodical and brutal. Hana sent down a landing team in full combat armor. She watched through their helmet cameras as they moved through the ruins. The evidence was everywhere. Weapon signatures that matched the Vrakan Dominion, shell casings from their rifles, tracks from their heavy combat vehicles. The Vrakan were a species of reptilian warriors who controlled territory near human space. They had always been aggressive, always pushing boundaries. But this was different. This was not a border skirmish. This was a massacre designed to send a message. Hana's team found survivors in a basement shelter. 23 people out of 15,000. They were terrified, traumatized, barely able to speak. One man finally told the story. The Vrakan ships had arrived without warning. They destroyed the defenses in minutes. Then they landed troops. The Vrakan had not tried to occupy the colony. They had simply killed everyone they found. The survivors had hidden in reinforced shelters and were only alive because the Vrakan had not searched thoroughly. Hana recorded everything. Every body, every destroyed building, every piece of evidence. The data was transmitted directly to Earth, to Admiral Minho Park's office. Minho watched the footage with growing horror. He had seen war before, but this was something else. This was not soldiers fighting soldiers. This was the deliberate murder of civilians. Children, elderly people, families like the one he had left behind on Earth that morning. Within hours, 2 more colonies reported Vrakan attacks. Colony 12 and Colony 18. Both followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force from orbit, followed by ground troops killing survivors. The Vrakan were not raiding for resources. They were not trying to conquer territory. They were trying to terrorize humanity into abandoning this region of space. They had calculated that humans were soft, that humanity would retreat rather than fight. Minho convened an emergency meeting of Earth's military leadership. Generals and admirals filled the war room. Some argued for a measured response. Launch counterattacks against Vrakan military targets. Show strength but avoid escalation. Others wanted revenge, wanted to hit the Vrakan hard and fast. The debate raged for hours while more reports came in. More colonies under attack, more civilians dead. The Vrakan were moving fast, trying to create panic. Ambassador Sora Kim tried diplomatic channels. She contacted the Galactic Council, demanded they intervene, demanded they condemn the Vrakan attacks. The response was disappointing. Most species expressed concern but refused to take sides. They remembered their own conflicts with humanity. They knew humans could be dangerous when provoked. Quietly, many alien diplomats seemed to think humanity deserved this for expanding so aggressively. Sora realized with bitter clarity that humanity would receive no help. On the third day, Earth's government made its decision. The message was delivered to Minho in a sealed envelope. He opened it and read the single sentence that changed everything. The president had authorized him to resolve the Vrakan problem permanently, using any means necessary. No restrictions, no rules of engagement, just one objective: make sure the Vrakan could never threaten humanity again. Minho called his senior officers together. He looked at each of them in turn. These were good people, dedicated soldiers who had spent their careers protecting Earth and its colonies. Now he was about to order them to do things that would haunt them forever. He spoke clearly and calmly. The Vrakan have chosen war. They have killed our civilians. They have targeted our families. They believe we are weak, that we will negotiate, that we will surrender territory to buy peace. He paused, letting his words sink in. They are wrong. We will show them what happens when humanity is pushed beyond negotiation. We will not fight by their rules. We will not seek honor or glory. We will seek total victory. We will destroy their ability to make war. We will destroy their will to fight, and when we are finished, the entire galaxy will understand that attacking humanity is not a mistake you get to make twice. The officers sat in silence. They understood what was being asked of them. This would not be a limited war. This would not be a series of battles followed by a peace treaty. This would be systematic, ruthless, and terrifying. Captain Hana Choi thought about the children she had seen lying dead in Colony 7's streets. Colonel Taehyun Yoon remembered friends who had been stationed at Colony 12. Dr. Ji-Won Lee realized her theoretical weapons research would soon become very real. Across human space, the news spread. Images from the colonies were broadcast everywhere. People saw what the Vrakan had done. Anger replaced fear. Citizens volunteered for military service in numbers not seen in generations. Factories began running around the clock, producing weapons and ships. The industrial capacity of dozens of worlds shifted to war production. Humanity, peaceful for 2 decades, was waking up. And the Vrakan Dominion had no idea what they had unleashed. In Vrakan territory, their military leaders celebrated their victories. They had struck the humans hard, killed thousands, destroyed multiple colonies. Surely now the humans would negotiate, would agree to withdraw from disputed systems. The Vrakan High Command sent messages demanding human surrender, expecting a quick resolution. They received no reply. Humanity was not interested in talking. Humanity was preparing to teach the Vrakan the most expensive lesson in galactic history. Dr. Ji-Won Lee had spent her entire career studying theoretical physics. Her research focused on clean energy and peaceful applications of advanced technology. She had never wanted to build weapons, but when the images from Colony 7 reached her laboratory, everything changed. She looked at the dead children, the burning cities, the families torn apart. She made a decision that would define the rest of her life. If humanity needed weapons to survive, she would build them the best weapons possible. Her team worked without sleep for 3 days straight. They pulled research from classified archives, projects that had been shelved as too dangerous or too destructive. Project Prometheus had been designed 10 years earlier but never built. It was a kinetic bombardment system guided by artificial intelligence. The AI could calculate trajectories, predict enemy movements, and coordinate strikes across entire star systems. The weapon was precise enough to hit a specific building from orbit, powerful enough to crack planetary shields. Ji-Won presented her work to Admiral Minho Park. He listened carefully as she explained the capabilities. The system could be deployed on every human warship within 3 months. It would give humanity overwhelming firepower with minimal risk to their own forces. Minho asked only one question. Will it work? Ji-Won looked him in the eye and said yes. Minho approved the project immediately and assigned her unlimited resources. Money, personnel, materials, whatever she needed. While Ji-Won built weapons, Captain Hana Choi prepared for a different kind of mission. Her stealth frigate was perfect for deep reconnaissance. Minho needed intelligence on Vrakan territory. How many worlds did they control? Where were their military bases? What were the locations of their supply routes? Hana would have to sneak into enemy space, gather information, and return without being detected. If she was caught, the Vrakan would kill her and her crew. The shadow of Earth crossed into Vrakan space using routes that avoided their patrol patterns. Hana's crew worked in shifts, maintaining constant vigilance. They used passive sensors, only listening to Vrakan communications without transmitting anything that could give away their position. For 2 weeks they moved from system to system, building a complete map of Vrakan military infrastructure. What they discovered was both encouraging and troubling. The Vrakan had spread themselves thin across 47 colony worlds. Their military was powerful, but decentralized. Each world had its own defense force with little coordination between systems. They relied on aggressive tactics and superior individual warriors rather than organized strategy. Hana realized their weakness immediately. The Vrakan were strong in direct combat but vulnerable to coordinated attacks. She also found something that made her blood run cold. In a captured transmission, Vrakan commanders discussed their attacks on human colonies with satisfaction. They laughed about how easily humans died. They made jokes about human weakness. They were planning more attacks, preparing to push deeper into human territory. The Vrakan High Command believed their campaign was succeeding. They expected humanity to surrender within months. Back on Earth, the mobilization continued at an incredible pace. Shipyards that normally produced civilian transports now built warships. Every major industrial world contributed to the war effort. Soldiers trained in new tactics designed specifically for fighting the Vrakan. Medical teams prepared for mass casualties. Supply officers organized logistics for campaigns that might last years. Humanity was transforming from a peaceful civilization into a war machine. Colonel Taehyun Yoon commanded the 5th Orbital Drop Division. His soldiers were elite troops trained for rapid deployment from space. They could land on a hostile planet, secure objectives, and hold territory until reinforcements arrived. Taehyun had survived the initial Vrakan attack on Colony 7 by pure luck. He had been on leave, visiting family on Earth when the attack happened. His entire unit had been stationed on Colony 7, 300 soldiers all dead. Now Taehyun trained new recruits with a fury that bordered on obsession. He pushed them harder than regulations allowed. He made them practice drop insertions until they could do it perfectly under any conditions. He taught them that the Vrakan were physically stronger, but humans were smarter, faster to adapt, better at working together. He told them that when they landed on Vrakan worlds, they would not be seeking glory. They would be seeking justice for every human civilian the Vrakan had killed. Ambassador Sora Kim stood before the Galactic Council and made one final attempt at diplomacy. She showed them the evidence from Colony 7. She displayed the recordings of Vrakan commanders laughing about killing humans. She asked them to intervene, to pressure the Vrakan into stopping their attacks. The response was exactly what she expected. Expressions of concern, empty promises to investigate but no real action. An ambassador from the Thrall species, crystalline beings who valued trade above all else, suggested that humanity should negotiate a territorial compromise. Give the Vrakan some systems in exchange for peace. Sora felt her anger rising but kept her voice calm. She looked around the council chamber and spoke clearly so every species present would hear her words. We came to you asking for justice. We showed you evidence of war crimes against our civilians. We requested only that you uphold the laws you all claim to respect. You have chosen neutrality. You have chosen to do nothing while our people are murdered. Very well. Humanity will remember this, and when you judge what comes next, remember that we gave you the chance to stop this peacefully. What happens now is on you, as much as it is on the Vrakan. She left the council chamber and transmitted a message to Earth. No help is coming. We are on our own. The response from Admiral Minho Park was brief. Understood. Proceed with the plan. The plan was Operation Nightfall, a coordinated strike on Vrakan military infrastructure that would announce humanity's entry into the war with devastating clarity. 3 months after the Colony 7 massacre, humanity was ready. 200 warships assembled in hidden staging areas. Every ship had been upgraded with Dr. Jiwan Lee's weapon systems. Every crew had trained extensively in the new tactics. Every soldier was prepared for what they would have to do. The fleet included battleships, cruisers, destroyers, stealth frigates, and support vessels. It was the largest military force humanity had assembled in 50 years. Admiral Minho Park reviewed the final plans one last time. Operation Nightfall would hit 23 Vrakan military installations simultaneously. The attacks would be coordinated to the second, overwhelming Vrakan defenses before they could respond. The goal was not to conquer territory. The goal was to cripple the Vrakan military so badly that they could never threaten humanity again. Captain Hana Choi received special orders. Her mission was to infiltrate Vrakan High Command headquarters and eliminate their senior military leadership. It was an assassination mission, something that went against every rule of civilized warfare. Hana did not hesitate to accept. She had walked through Colony 7's ruins. She had seen what the Vrakan did to defenseless civilians. The Vrakan had started this war by breaking every rule. Humanity would finish it the same way. The Vrakan remained confident. Their intelligence services had detected increased human military activity, but dismissed it as defensive preparations. They believed humans were too afraid to attack. The Vrakan military continued planning their next wave of colony attacks. They discussed which human worlds to target next, how many troops to deploy, what terror tactics would be most effective. They had no idea that every transmission they sent was being intercepted and analyzed by human intelligence. On the night, before Operation Nightfall launched, Minho addressed his fleet commanders via secure transmission. He spoke about the responsibility they carried, the weight of the decisions they would make. He reminded them that they were fighting not for conquest or glory, but for survival. The Vrakan had forced this war upon humanity. Now humanity would teach them that some wars should never be started. Across human space, civilians watched the news and waited. They knew something was coming. The mobilization had been impossible to hide. Military convoys moved openly through cities. Warships departed from orbital stations in large formations. Parents held their children close, hoping the war would end quickly. Soldiers said goodbye to their families, knowing they might never return. And in the depths of space, the human fleet prepared to show the galaxy what humanity looked like when pushed beyond the point of mercy. The attack began at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. 200 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in 23 different star systems simultaneously. The coordination was perfect. Years of preparation and months of training came together in a single moment. The Vrakan had never seen anything like it. One moment their territory was secure. The next moment, human forces were everywhere. At Forward Base 17, the Vrakan garrison was celebrating a recent promotion ceremony. Soldiers drank fermented beverages and boasted about their victories over human colonists. The warning sirens caught them completely off guard. By the time they reached their defensive positions, human kinetic rounds were already falling from orbit. The AI guidance systems that Dr. Jiwan Lee had developed calculated every trajectory with inhuman precision. Each round struck exactly where it was supposed to strike. The base's shield generators exploded first. Then the command center. Then the barracks, the ammunition storage, the landing pads. In 3 minutes, Forward Base 17 ceased to exist as a functional military installation. The human ships never even entered weapons range of the Vrakan defensive platforms. They fired from deep space and jumped away before the Vrakan could mount a response. Admiral Minho Park watched the operation unfold from Earth Command. Holographic displays showed each target system in real time. Green indicators appeared as objectives were destroyed. The reports came in steadily. Forward Base 17 eliminated. Supply Depot 9 destroyed. Command Station 42 offline. Shipyard Complex 3 burning. The Vrakan military infrastructure was being systematically dismantled. The Vrakan tried to respond. They scrambled fighters and sent patrol ships to intercept the human forces. But humanity was not fighting the kind of war the Vrakan understood. Human ships used electronic warfare to blind Vrakan sensors. Drone swarms overwhelmed their targeting systems. Long-range missiles destroyed Vrakan vessels before they could close to combat range. When Vrakan commanders tried to organize coordinated defenses, they found their communication networks jammed or compromised. Captain Hana Choi had the most dangerous mission of the entire operation. While the fleet attacked military bases, she had to infiltrate Vrakan High Command headquarters and eliminate their senior leadership. Her stealth frigate, Shadow of Earth, approached the headquarters station using a captured Vrakan identification code. The guards let her dock, believing she was a supply vessel. Hana led a team of 12 special operations soldiers off the ship. They wore thermoptic camouflage that bent light around their bodies, making them nearly invisible. They carried weapons designed for close-quarters combat, neural disruptors that could knock out targets without killing them, plasma blades that cut through armor, and small explosive charges for destroying equipment. The team moved through the station like ghosts. Security cameras saw nothing. Guards walked past without noticing them. Hana had studied the station's layout for weeks. She knew every corridor, every checkpoint, every escape route. Her team reached the command center in 15 minutes. 3 Vrakan admirals were inside, discussing the human attacks that were devastating their forces. Hana deactivated her camouflage and stepped into view. The admirals reached for their weapons but froze when they saw a dozen human soldiers materialize around them. Hana spoke in perfect Vrakan language. She told them that this was a message from humanity. The message was simple. You attacked our civilians. You murdered our families. Now you will pay the price. One admiral tried to fight. He was a veteran warrior who had won dozens of battles. He lunged at Hana with surprising speed. She shot him with her neural disruptor without hesitation. He collapsed instantly. The other 2 admirals realized they had no chance. Hana's team secured them quickly, then activated the station's broadcast system. Every Vrakan military channel received the same transmission. Images of the 3 admirals bound and helpless, surrounded by human soldiers who had penetrated the heart of Vrakan command. Hana delivered a message directly to every Vrakan soldier watching. Your leaders told you humans were weak. They told you we would surrender easily. They were wrong. This is what happens when you underestimate humanity. We do not fight with honor. We do not seek glory. We fight to win. And we will not stop until you are no longer a threat. The psychological impact was devastating. Vrakan soldiers across their entire territory saw their admirals captured inside their own headquarters. The base they believed was impregnable had been breached without anyone noticing. Human soldiers had walked through their most secure facility like it was nothing. Morale collapsed. Units abandoned their posts. Commanders questioned orders. The Vrakan military, built on warrior pride and confidence, began to crack. By the time Operation Nightfall ended 72 hours later, the Vrakan had lost 40% of their forward military capacity. 23 bases destroyed, 12 supply depots eliminated, 7 shipyards burning, their communication networks compromised, their leadership decapitated, and most importantly, their belief in inevitable victory shattered. The human fleet withdrew as quickly as it had arrived. Admiral Minho Park had no interest in occupying Vrakan territory. The mission was to cripple their ability to wage war, not to conquer their worlds. Human forces jumped back into hyperspace before Vrakan reinforcements could arrive. They left behind only burning wreckage and a clear message. This was just the beginning. Colonel Taehyun Yoon's ground forces had played a smaller role in Operation Nightfall, but their time was coming. During the fleet attacks, Taehyun's soldiers had been inserted on 3 Vrakan worlds to destroy ground installations that could not be reached from orbit. His troops performed flawlessly. They hit their targets, eliminated resistance, and extracted without losses. The Vrakan learned that human soldiers were just as dangerous on the ground as human ships were in space. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Ambassadors from dozens of species expressed concern about the conflict. Some called for peace negotiations, others suggested economic sanctions, but no one volunteered to actually intervene. Everyone remembered that humanity had asked for help and been refused. Everyone understood that the Vrakan had started this war with civilian massacres. Quietly, many species were relieved that humanity was dealing with the Vrakan problem. Ambassador Sora Kim addressed the council with cold satisfaction. She pointed out that humanity had conducted purely military operations. Every target had been a legitimate military installation. Human forces had not attacked civilian populations. The contrast with Vrakan tactics was obvious. When a council member suggested that humanity should accept a ceasefire, Sora's response was sharp. The Vrakan can have a ceasefire when they surrender unconditionally, not before. In Vrakan territory, panic spread. Their military leaders held emergency meetings trying to understand what had happened. How had humans coordinated such a massive attack? How had their intelligence been so complete? How had human soldiers penetrated their headquarters without being detected? The answers were disturbing. Humanity had been watching and learning for months. Every Vrakan transmission had been intercepted. Every patrol pattern had been mapped. The Vrakan had been completely outplayed. The Vrakan High Command sent a message to humanity proposing negotiations. They suggested a return to pre-war boundaries in compensation for damaged colonies. Admiral Minho Park read the message and deleted it without responding. The time for negotiations had passed. The Vrakan had chosen to communicate through violence. Humanity would continue that conversation in the same language until the Vrakan had nothing left to say. Operation Nightfall had achieved everything Minho hoped for and more. The Vrakan military was crippled but not destroyed. They could still fight, which meant humanity could continue fighting them. The war would not end with a single battle. It would continue until the Vrakan were completely broken, until they understood that attacking humanity had been the worst mistake in their species' history. The first blow had been struck. Many more would follow. The Vrakan refused to surrender. Their leadership believed they could still win if they regrouped and counterattacked. They pulled their remaining forces back to defend their colony worlds. They believed humans would not attack civilian populations, that human morality would limit their response. They were wrong on both counts. Humanity had decided that half measures only prolonged wars. The only way to ensure the Vrakan never threatened anyone again was to destroy their ability to support a military entirely. Admiral Minho Park authorized Operation Ragnarok. The name was chosen deliberately. This would not be a limited campaign. This would be the systematic destruction of Vrakan industrial capacity across all 47 of their colony worlds. Human forces would render each world unable to build weapons, manufacture ships, or support military operations. The colonies would not be occupied. They would simply be reduced to pre-industrial status. The first target was Colony World 12, a manufacturing center that produced weapons and ammunition. The human fleet arrived and broadcast a simple message. All civilians have 6 hours to evacuate major cities and industrial areas. After 6 hours, bombardment will begin. Anyone remaining in target zones will be considered an acceptable casualty. The Vrakan governor refused to believe humanity would actually do it. 6 hours later, the bombardment began. Kinetic penetrators fell from orbit at near light speed. Each round carried the energy of a small nuclear weapon. Factories exploded. Power plants were destroyed. Transportation networks were shattered. The strikes were precise, targeting only industrial and military infrastructure. But in dense cities, the destruction spread. Buildings collapsed. Fires burned out of control. Thousands of civilians who had not evacuated died in the chaos. Dr. Jiwon Lee watched the bombardment from a monitoring station. She saw the thermal blooms as her weapons struck their targets. She saw the casualty estimates climbing. Each number represented someone dead because of technology she had created. She felt sick but could not look away. This was the price of protecting humanity. This was what happened when someone forced a peaceful species to become monsters. Colony World 12 was just the beginning. Over the next 3 months, human forces attacked 38 Vrakan colonies. Each attack followed the same pattern: a warning to evacuate, then systematic destruction of everything that could support military operations. Some colonies complied with the evacuation orders. Others tried to fight. Those that fought lost even more than their infrastructure. They lost their populations. Colonel Tae-Hyun Yoon led ground operations on worlds that attempted armed resistance. His drop troops descended from orbit in armored pods, hitting the ground at supersonic speeds. They wore powered combat suits that made each soldier stronger than any Vrakan warrior. Their weapons were designed for overwhelming firepower. When Vrakan defenders tried to fight, they were simply annihilated. On Colony World 23, Vrakan military forces made their stand in a major city. They believed the humans would not risk destroying the city to get to them. They used civilians as shields, forcing them to stay in the combat zone. Colonel Taehyun gave them 1 hour to release the civilians. When they refused, he ordered his troops to attack anyway. The battle was brutal and short. Human soldiers moved through the city block by block, clearing resistance with ruthless efficiency. Taehyun found the Vrakan commander in a bunker beneath the city center. The commander was surrounded by dead civilians, people who had been used as hostages and then killed when they became inconvenient. Taehyun looked at the bodies and felt nothing but cold fury. He arrested the commander and brought him to the surface. Then he ordered his troops to execute every Vrakan soldier they had captured. No trials, no mercy, just justice for the civilians these soldiers had murdered. News of the execution spread across Vrakan space. Some saw it as a war crime, others saw it as inevitable. Captain Hana Choi, watching from her ship in orbit, understood that humanity had crossed a line. They were no longer fighting a clean war. They were fighting the kind of war the Vrakan had started, where the only rule was victory at any cost. She wondered if humanity would ever be able to step back from this darkness. The worst moment came on Colony World 37. The Vrakan defenders refused to surrender despite losing all their military advantages. They turned the entire colony into a fortress, forcing every civilian to help build defenses. Human forces could not destroy the military targets without killing tens of thousands of civilians. Admiral Minho Park made a decision that would haunt him forever. He authorized the use of nanoweapons. Dr. Jiwon Lee had developed the nanoweapons as a last resort, microscopic machines that could consume specific materials. She had programmed them to target refined metals and advanced composites. When released on Colony World 37, they spread through the industrial areas like a plague. Within days, every piece of advanced technology on the planet began to break down. Weapons fell apart. Vehicles stopped working. Buildings lost their structural integrity. The nanoweapons did not directly kill anyone, but the collapse of infrastructure killed thousands. Power systems failed. Water treatment plants stopped operating. Medical equipment became useless. The colony descended into chaos as it was forced back to a pre-industrial state. Survivors fled into the countryside, trying to escape the invisible death that was eating their civilization. Within a month, Colony World 37 went from a thriving industrial center to a primitive society struggling to survive. The Galactic Council condemned the nanoweapon attack. Multiple species called it a crime against civilization. Ambassador Sora Kim stood before them and delivered a speech that silenced the entire chamber. She reminded them that the Vrakan had started this war by deliberately massacring civilians. She pointed out that humanity had given multiple warnings before each attack. She asked them where their outrage had been when human children were being murdered. Then Sora said something that made every ambassador uncomfortable. "You are not upset because of what we are doing. You are upset because you realize we could do it to you. You are afraid that if you ever threaten humanity, this is what will happen to your worlds. Good. That fear will keep the peace better than any treaty. Let the Vrakan be a lesson to every species in this galaxy. Attack humanity and face extinction." Individual Vrakan colonies began surrendering independently. Governors who saw their worlds being systematically destroyed decided that following orders from high command was suicide. They transmitted surrender offers directly to human forces. Admiral Minho Park accepted some surrenders and rejected others. Colonies that surrendered early and provided intelligence were spared. Colonies that fought to the end faced complete destruction. By the 6th month of Operation Ragnarok, the Vrakan Dominion was collapsing. 38 of their 47 colonies had been neutralized. Their military was reduced to scattered remnants trying to defend their remaining worlds. Their economy had collapsed entirely. Millions of Vrakan were refugees fleeing destroyed colonies with nowhere to go. The proud warrior species that had started this war was broken. Captain Hana Choi's stealth missions continued throughout the campaign. She gathered intelligence on remaining Vrakan forces. She assassinated commanders who tried to organize resistance. She sabotaged supply lines and destroyed communications equipment. Her crew operated in enemy territory for months without rest, always one step ahead of Vrakan hunters. They became legends among human forces and nightmares for the Vrakan. Dr. Jiwon Lee stopped sleeping. Every night she saw the faces of people killed by her weapons. She knew the bombardments were necessary. She knew the nanoweapons had saved human lives by avoiding ground battles, but knowing something was necessary did not make it easier to live with. She continued working because stopping would mean admitting that the horror was for nothing. She developed new weapons, each more terrible than the last because humanity might need them to finish the war. Admiral Minho Park received one final message from Vrakan High Command. It was not a surrender. It was a defiant declaration that they would fight to the last Vrakan, rather than submit to human domination. Minho read it and felt no anger, only tired determination. Very well, he thought. If that is your choice, we will accommodate it. He began planning the final phase of the war, the assault on the Vrakan homeworld itself, the place where this war would finally end. Vraka Prime hung in space like a jewel. The Vrakan homeworld was beautiful, covered in red forests and purple oceans. 3 billion Vrakan lived on the surface, the heart of their civilization. Everything they valued, everything they were, existed on this single planet. And now the human fleet had come to take it all away. Admiral Minho Park stood on the bridge of the UEF Indomitable, his flagship. Behind him, 200 warships waited in formation. The entire might of humanity's military had gathered for this final battle. But Minho had no intention of fighting a battle. The Vrakan homeworld was defended by powerful planetary shields, orbital weapons platforms, and the remnants of their fleet. A direct assault would cost thousands of human lives. Minho refused to spend those lives when there was another way. The human fleet established a complete blockade. Every approach to Vraka Prime was covered. No ships could leave. No supplies could enter. The homeworld was isolated, cut off from the few remaining colonies that still supported them. Minho sent a message to the Vrakan leadership. Surrender unconditionally or watch your world starve. The Vrakan High Command rejected the demand with contempt. They believed they could outlast a blockade, that humans would eventually lose patience and leave. They did not understand what was really happening. While the blockade held their attention, human construction ships were working near Vraka Prime's sun. Dr. Ji-Won Lee had designed one final weapon, something so terrible that she had sworn never to build it. But Minho had convinced her that the threat alone might end the war without more bloodshed. So she had provided the plans, and now human engineers were assembling a stellar compression device. The device was massive, a ring of exotic matter generators that could manipulate gravitational forces. Once activated, it would compress the star's core, triggering a premature collapse. The star would go supernova within hours, destroying everything in the system. It was not a weapon designed to be used. It was a weapon designed to terrify, to force surrender through the threat of absolute annihilation. Captain Hana Choi led a mission to place sensors throughout the system, devices that would detect any attempt to sabotage the stellar compression device. Her team worked in constant danger, knowing that Vrakan ships might find them at any moment. But they completed their mission successfully. The device was protected. Now humanity held the power to destroy an entire star system, and the Vrakan could do nothing to stop it. 3 weeks into the blockade, the device was complete. Admiral Minho Park broadcast a message on every Vrakan communication channel. Images of the stellar compression device filled screens across the homeworld. Human engineers demonstrated its capabilities, showing simulations of what would happen when it activated. The star would expand, consuming the inner planets. Then it would collapse and explode, sterilizing everything within 10 light years. Minho's voice was calm as he delivered humanity's final ultimatum. You have one choice: unconditional surrender within 72 hours, or we activate the device and turn your sun into your tomb. There will be no negotiations. There will be no compromise. Surrender or die. The entire Vrakan species. Every man, woman, and child on your homeworld. You have 72 hours to decide if your pride is worth extinction. Panic spread across Vraka Prime. The civilian population had been told they were winning the war, that human forces were exhausted and would soon withdraw. Now they learned the truth. Their colonies were destroyed. Their military was broken, and humans had built a weapon capable of killing everyone on the homeworld. Protests erupted in cities across the planet. Crowds demanded that their leadership surrender. The Vrakan High Command met in emergency session. Military leaders argued for continued resistance. They spoke of warrior honor, of dying with dignity rather than submitting to human domination. But civilian representatives had also been called to the meeting. They spoke of 3 billion lives that would be lost if the leadership chose pride over survival. They spoke of children who deserved a future, even if that future was under human rule. The argument raged for 2 days. Military officers threatened to arrest anyone who suggested surrender. But the civilian population was no longer listening to military leadership. Riots began. Government buildings were attacked. The people of Raqqa Prime were terrified of the human weapon hanging over their sun, and they blamed their own leaders for bringing this disaster upon them. On the third day, with only hours remaining before the deadline, the civilian government staged a coup. They arrested the military leadership and seized control. Then they transmitted their surrender to Admiral Minho Park. They agreed to every demand: complete disarmament, occupation by human forces, war crime trials for those responsible for the colony massacres, payment of reparations for the next century, and most humiliating of all, acceptance that the stellar compression device would remain in place permanently. Minho accepted the surrender. He ordered Colonel Taehyun Yoon to lead the occupation forces down to the surface. Vrakan soldiers were ordered to lay down their weapons and report to collection centers. Most complied. A few tried to resist and were killed by their own civilian police forces. The Vrakan people had chosen survival, and they would enforce that choice against anyone who threatened it. The formal surrender ceremony took place aboard the UEF Indomitable. Vrakan leaders were brought to the flagship in restraints. They knelt before Admiral Minho Park while human soldiers recorded everything. The surrender document was read aloud and broadcast across the entire galaxy. Every species heard the terms. The Vrakan Dominion was dissolved. Their territory would be administered by human governors for 3 generations. Their military would be permanently disbanded. They would become a subject species, allowed to exist only at humanity's pleasure. Captain Hana Choi watched the ceremony from her ship. She felt no satisfaction in the victory. She thought about all the people who had died in this war. Human colonists murdered by Vrakan troops, Vrakan civilians killed in bombardments, soldiers on both sides, all dead because the Vrakan leadership had believed humans were weak. She wondered if the lesson would last, or if someday another species would make the same mistake. Dr. Ji-Won Lee remained at the stellar compression device, monitoring its systems. The device was permanent now. It could not be removed without triggering the very disaster it threatened. Human technicians would maintain it for centuries, perhaps forever. It would hang in Raqqa Prime's sky like a sword, a constant reminder of what would happen if the Vrakan ever threatened humanity again. Ji-Won looked at her creation and felt sick. She had built something that could murder an entire star system. That knowledge would never leave her. Ambassador Sora Kim addressed the Galactic Council one final time. She did not apologize for what humanity had done. Instead, she explained that this had been the only way to ensure lasting peace. The Vrakan had proven they could not be trusted with military power. Now they would live under human supervision until they learned to be peaceful, and the stellar compression device would ensure they remained peaceful forever. Some ambassadors called it justice. Others called it tyranny, but none of them suggested releasing the Vrakan from human control. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of when threatened. Every species understood the implicit message. This could happen to you. Attack humanity and face complete destruction. It was a lesson written in the ruins of 38 colony worlds and enforced by a weapon aimed at a star. The war was over. Humanity had won absolutely, but victory felt hollow. Colonel Taehyun Yoon walked through the streets of Raqqa Prime's capital city, watching Vrakan civilians going about their lives under human occupation. They looked at human soldiers with fear and hatred. Children hid behind their parents. These people had not started the war, but they would pay for it for generations. Admiral Minho Park returned to Earth a hero. Parades celebrated the victory. Politicians praised his strategic brilliance. But at night, alone in his quarters, he thought about the choices he had made. The colonies he had destroyed, the civilians who had died, the stellar compression device that could kill billions with a single activation command. He had protected humanity, but at what cost to his own soul? The Vrakan Dominion was gone. In its place was a network of occupied worlds, their people living under human rule. The stellar compression device orbited their sun, a permanent reminder of their defeat. And across the galaxy, every species looked at humanity with new eyes. They had always known humans were dangerous. Now they understood exactly how dangerous. The question that everyone asked was simple. What happened to the last species that defied humans? The answer was clear: complete and utter annihilation.